The American economy for much of the summer had appeared to be on solid ground. After a period of turbulence, a sense of stability had settled in, with inflation showing signs of moderating and consumer spending holding steady. President Trump had recently celebrated several significant victories, which seemed to bolster his administration's confidence. Congress had passed his signature domestic policy legislation, a package that included deep cuts to the social safety net, marking a substantial legislative win. Furthermore, his assertive trade tactics appeared to pay dividends when the European Union agreed to a new trade deal during his visit to Scotland, a development that quickly emboldened the White House to pursue even more aggressive tariff strategies. This period of perceived strength, however, proved to be the calm before a storm of presidential action. The relative quiet was abruptly broken on the first day of August, a day that would see President Trump react with startling intensity to both domestic economic news and distant international provocations. The series of events that unfolded would reignite long-standing concerns about his leadership style, his respect for institutional norms, and his impulsive decision-making process. What began as a routine release of government data quickly spiraled into a multi-front battle waged by the president against perceived enemies both at home and abroad, leaving many to wonder about the stability of his command. The catalyst for this sudden eruption was the July 2025 jobs report. While the economy had been showing signs of resilience, this particular report indicated a significant and unexpected slowdown in hiring. For any administration, such news would be unwelcome, typically prompting a carefully crafted response aimed at reassuring markets and the public. Yet for President Trump, the data was not just a disappointment. It was interpreted as a personal and political attack. His reaction was not one of policy adjustment or strategic reassurance, but of immediate and aggressive retaliation, setting a tone of confrontation that would define the day's chaotic events. What followed was a cascade of actions that seemed to confirm the fears of critics who have long warned about the president's authoritarian tendencies. The day's events went far beyond a simple dispute over economic statistics. They encompassed the firing of a respected civil servant, a startling military directive announced on social media, and renewed attacks on the independence of the nation's central bank. This whirlwind of activity, all occurring within a matter of hours, painted a picture of a president increasingly intolerant of dissent or any information that contradicts his preferred narrative, raising profound questions about the guardrails of American democracy and the exercise of presidential power. The official release of the July jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS, should have been a standard, if politically inconvenient, event. The numbers pointed to a slowdown, a development that economists would analyze and policymakers would debate. President Trump, however, chose a different path. Instead of engaging with the substance of the report, he immediately declared the figures to be fraudulent. He took to his social media platform to claim the numbers were rigged, alleging a conspiracy orchestrated from within the government to undermine his presidency. This accusation was not new in his political playbook, but its target, a nonpartisan agency responsible for crucial economic data, represented a significant escalation. This public denunciation was swiftly followed by a more concrete and alarming action, the firing of Erica McIntarfer, the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. McIntarfer, who had been confirmed with bipartisan support in 2024, was a career professional tasked with overseeing the integrity of the nation's employment data. In dismissing her, President Trump accused her of a sustained campaign to manipulate economic statistics against him. This claim was widely dismissed by economists across the political spectrum, who defended the BLS's long-standing reputation for impartiality and professionalism, noting that its methodologies are transparent and rigorously vetted to prevent political interference. The move sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond, particularly among those who value the independence of federal statistical agencies. William W. Beach, who served as the BLS commissioner during Trump's first term, called the firing groundless and a dangerous precedent. His criticism was particularly resonant, as it came from a former appointee of the president himself. Experts warned that attacking the credibility of the BLS could erode public trust in essential economic indicators, making it more difficult for businesses, investors, and everyday citizens to make informed decisions. The fear is that if objective data can be dismissed and its messengers punished, policy will be driven by political whim rather than reality. This episode was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of challenging any data or expertise that contradicts the president's agenda. Throughout his time in office, President Trump has shown a willingness to sideline or discredit government scientists, intelligence officials, and economic advisors who present inconvenient truths. By firing the head of the BLS, he sent a clear and chilling message to all civil servants: produce favorable information or risk your career. This action solidified concerns that the administration is committed to rooting out any official who stands in the way of its political narrative, regardless of their commitment to objective fact-finding. As the controversy over the jobs report and the firing of the BLS commissioner was still unfolding, President Trump turned his attention to the international stage with equally startling abruptness. The trigger was not a formal diplomatic communique or an imminent military threat, but a series of provocative online posts from Dmitri Medvedev, the former Russian president and a prominent hardliner. Frustrated with the ongoing war in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin's refusal to de-escalate, Trump appeared to interpret Medvedev's inflammatory rhetoric about nuclear conflict as a direct challenge to his authority. His response was swift, public, and profoundly unsettling to many national security experts. In a move that bypassed traditional military and diplomatic channels, President Trump announced via his social media platform that he had ordered U.S. nuclear submarines to be repositioned. He stated that the submarines were to be moved into the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. This public declaration of a sensitive military maneuver, typically handled with the utmost secrecy, was extraordinary. It represented a form of high-stakes global signaling that many experts found reckless, arguing that it could easily be misinterpreted by adversaries and allies alike, potentially escalating tensions rather than deterring aggression. The decision to publicize the movement of nuclear assets was criticized by defense analysts as a dangerous departure from established protocol. Strategic deterrence relies on a combination of demonstrated capability and deliberate ambiguity. By announcing the repositioning of submarines, the most survivable leg of the nuclear triad, the president potentially undermined their strategic value while introducing a volatile new element into an already tense geopolitical landscape. Former national security officials expressed alarm, noting that such decisions are normally made after careful consultation with military commanders and are communicated through secure, private channels to avoid miscalculation and unintended consequences. This impulsive military posturing highlighted a core concern about President Trump's leadership, a tendency to react to provocations in a highly personalized and performative manner, often without a full appreciation for the strategic implications. His actions seemed driven more by a desire to project an image of strength in response to a perceived slight than by a calculated national security strategy. The event served as a stark reminder of the immense power vested in the presidency and the potential for a single individual's temperament to shape global events, raising fears about how such impulsiveness might play out in a genuine international crisis where the stakes are infinitely higher. President Trump's actions on August 1st were not random outbursts, but honestly, extensions of a consistent and deliberate strategy to challenge and dismantle the independence of institutions designed to function outside of direct political control. His attacks are not limited to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're part of a broader campaign against any official or agency that dares to defy his will. A prime example is his relentless criticism of the Federal Reserve and its chair, Jerome H. Powell. For months, Trump has publicly berated Powell for not cutting interest rates on his command, treating the central bank as a political tool meant to serve his administration's short-term goals. Following the disappointing July jobs report, the president immediately renewed his assault on the Federal Reserve. He once again demanded Powell's resignation, publicly blaming him for the economic slowdown. In his attacks, he has often veered into personal territory, even criticizing Powell for his management of a renovation project at the Federal Reserve's headquarters in Washington. This pattern of harassment is intended to undermine the Fed's credibility and pressure its leadership into compliance. The recent resignation of Fed Governor Adriana Kugler has only emboldened the president, who now points to her departure as evidence of Powell's supposed mismanagement, further fueling his campaign against the institution's independence. This approach extends deep into the executive branch, where the president has systematically sought to install loyalists and remove anyone perceived as an obstacle. He has a well-documented history of firing inspectors general, the internal watchdogs tasked with rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse within federal agencies. These officials are meant to be independent, but Trump has treated their oversight as a personal affront. Similarly, his influence over the Justice Department has raised persistent alarms about the rule of law, with critics arguing that he has sought to use its power to punish his political enemies and protect his allies, blurring the line between justice and political retribution. Even the nation's foreign policy tools have been repurposed to settle political scores and advance ideological aims. In a striking example, the Trump administration recently imposed sanctions on a Supreme Court justice in Brazil. The justice is overseeing a case against Jair Bolsonaro, the former Brazilian president and a close Trump ally, who is accused of attempting to overturn his country's 2022 election. The sanctions, reportedly pushed by Bolsonaro's son, demonstrate a willingness to use powerful economic levers, typically reserved for addressing threats to U.S. national security, to intervene in the domestic legal affairs of another country on behalf of a political friend, further eroding established norms. The growing alarm over President Trump's behavior is not confined to his political opponents or outside critics. Some of the most pointed warnings are now coming from those who once served within his own administration, offering a unique and troubling perspective on his fitness for office. These former officials, having witnessed his decision-making process up close, are speaking out with increasing urgency about the dangers they perceive. Their critiques carry significant weight as they can't be easily dismissed as partisan attacks. They are the assessments of individuals who once held positions of immense trust and responsibility at the highest levels of the U.S. government. John R. Bolton, who served as Trump's national security advisor, has become one of the most vocal critics from this group. In response to the recent events, Bolton stated bluntly that the president's actions are more evidence he's not fit to be president. He described a commander-in-chief who acts impulsively, without fully understanding or considering the strategic consequences of his directives. Bolton has painted a picture of a White House where the president surrounds himself exclusively with yes men, creating an echo chamber that isolates him from dissenting views and objective analysis. According to Bolton, President Trump is not deterred by reality, a chilling assessment from a man once tasked with advising him on matters of war and peace. These concerns are echoed by others who have departed the administration. They describe a leader who is deeply suspicious of expertise and views policy debates not as a means to find the best solution, but as a test of personal loyalty. Former advisors have recounted instances where carefully prepared intelligence briefings were ignored in favor of gut feelings or information gleaned from television news. This disdain for process and expertise is particularly worrisome in the realms of national security and economic policy, where complex decisions require nuanced understanding and a steady hand. The fear among these former insiders is that the president's impulsiveness could lead to a catastrophic miscalculation. The recurring theme in the warnings from former officials is the erosion of institutional guardrails. They argue that President Trump does not see government agencies, the military, or the justice system as independent entities serving the public, but as instruments of his personal power to be wielded against his adversaries. This perspective, they contend, is fundamentally at odds with the principles of American democracy. Their collective testimony suggests that the erratic behavior on display is not a new development, but a core aspect of his leadership style, one that has become more pronounced and less constrained over time, posing a significant risk to the stability and integrity of the nation. The events of early August 2025, from the firing of a civil servant to the public declaration of nuclear submarine movements, encapsulate a pattern of behavior that has deeply unsettled many Americans. At the heart of this anxiety is not just disagreement with President Trump's policies, but a profound concern over his use of presidential power. His actions demonstrate a consistent willingness to disregard institutional norms, attack independent sources of information, and treat the vast apparatus of the U.S. government as a personal tool to reward allies and punish perceived enemies. This approach challenges the very foundations of a government based on laws, checks and balances, and objective reality. The assault on the Bureau of Labor Statistics serves as a clear example. By firing its commissioner for reporting politically inconvenient data, the president signaled that facts are subordinate to his political narrative. This creates a dangerous precedent where public trust in essential government functions is eroded, and policy decisions risk being made in an information vacuum shaped by loyalty rather than evidence. Similarly, his relentless attacks on the Federal Reserve threaten to politicize the nation's monetary policy, a move that could have devastating consequences for economic stability. These actions are not just about a single jobs report or interest rate decision. They're about fundamentally altering the relationship between political power and independent expertise. Furthermore, the president's puerile and impulsive posturing on the world stage, such as his ludicrous social media announcement regarding nuclear submarines, highlights the immense risks of a leadership style driven by personal pique. National security decisions that carry the weight of global stability are being made and communicated in a manner that bypasses decades of established protocol designed to prevent miscalculation and catastrophic error. This behavior, combined with the use of sanctions for political favors, suggests a view of foreign policy that is more about personal score settling and projecting strength than advancing the long-term strategic interests of the United States. In summary, the worries about President Trump's recent actions stem from the belief that he is systematically dismantling the guardrails that have historically constrained presidential power. The firings, the public threats, the attacks on independent institutions, and the use of government power for personal ends all point to a leadership style that prioritizes personal loyalty above all else. For many observers, both inside and outside of government, this is not a sustainable or stable way to govern. The concern is that each norm that is broken makes the next transgression easier, setting a precedent that could seriously weaken those democratic institutions that are designed to ensure accountability and protect the country from the frivolous and self-serving exercise of power. Please like and subscribe to keep truth alive.